Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Amanda Paul. I'm Deputy Head of the Europe in the World programme, and I lead the work on Ukraine at the EPC. Today we're going to be talking about a very important but also a heartbreaking issue, namely Russia's kidnapping of Ukrainian children. According to the Ukrainian authorities, since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia has stolen some 20,000 children. In fact, Russia had already started this ugly trend during the first phase of this war back in 2014, following its annexation and occupation of Crimea and the war in the Donbass. These children have been illegally deported, forcibly transferred to Russia, as well as Ukrainian territories that are currently under Russian occupation. The children are often sent to what we can term, I think, Russian re-education camps, where the children are brainwashed with Russian propaganda to wipe out their Ukrainian identity. They are also often militarized, and many other very heinous things. Other children are adopted by Russian families and their identities are changed, which makes it very difficult for these children to be traced other than by their DNA. Of course, under the 1948 Geneva Convention, forcibly transferring children and changing the child's nationality or civil status is considered a war crime. But as we know, Russia is no stranger to committing war crimes. In March 2023, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants against President Putin and Russia's Commissioner for Children's Rights, Mariam Lvova-Belova, for the war crime of unlawful deportation of children and unlawful transfer of children from occupied areas of Ukraine to the Russian Federation. Unfortunately, neither of these individuals are yet behind bars. One can only hope that justice will be served and we will see both of them behind bars one day. Now, today we have three excellent experts to discuss this heinous crime with us. All of them work on this on a day-to-day basis on the field and with partners from the international community. We are going to be looking at the current situation, what is being done, and of course, what more can be done to bring these children home. First and foremost, Mykola Kuleba, who is probably very well known to many of you, who's founder and head of Save Ukraine organization in Ukraine. Welcome to you, Mykola. It's a big pleasure to have you here today. Mariam Lambert, Humanitarian co-founder of the NGO Orphans Feeding Foundation. And last but certainly not least, Holliday, who's the Programme Director, Europe International Commission on Missing Persons, ICMP. I want to start by giving the floor to you, Mykola. I mean, you're a very well-known person for the excellent work that you've been doing in this field. So it would be really great if we could start by you giving us a sort of picture of the current situation vis-a-vis the kidnapping of children and their return. What sort of work your organization is doing? What are the main challenges that we are facing at the moment in the field?
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody, and thank you for invitation and for such a very important question and issue of this is our children. What could be more valuable than children? And let me just to give you some statistics, because after first invasion 2014, I've been Presidential Commissioner for Children's Rights with the President Poroshenko, and then 2 years with President Zelensky. And I provided monitoring of children's rights in Ukraine, and I know what happened in Donbass and Crimea. And after first invasion, we lost almost 1 million children. after that invasion, and almost 500,000 children lived in Crimea, and 1 million lived in Donbass. And Russia occupied territories of Donbass and Crimea, and almost 1 million children disappeared there. And we had no idea how to communicate with that children, what happened with them, how many orphans were there. And after first invasion, we helped evacuate children immediately from the orphanages. We saved thousands of lives that time. But after second invasion, it is more children. And now we can find young adults who've been school children to 2014, 2015, and they grew up under the Russians there with huge Russian propaganda. They've been brainwashed and militarized, recruited, and now these young adults fighting as the Russian soldiers. And we can find them in Ukrainian prisons in control area. And that who alive, who were not killed on the battlefield. And these young adults reporting us that they've been in Donbass and Crimea, and when Russia occupied, they started, and Russia started a huge indoctrination. They learned that Ukraine is a state of evil, Nazi state, and they have to fight for Russia because Russia is a victim. Russia won free these territories, and they grew up with a huge hatred towards Ukraine. And now we have these circumstances where new territories occupied and more Ukrainian children stays under the Russians. And we are returning now children from occupied territories in Russia. For now, we have 521 child who've been returned. And our last return was 4 children of mothers who've been captured, who've been militaries and who've been captured after full-scale invasion. And almost 2 years and 8 months, they've been in Russian prisons. They've been hugely tortured. And their children stayed on occupied territories. And last week, we returned them to Ukraine. It was so emotional moment when this mother met first time their children. And some of these mothers told me before their meeting with children that they did not believe they will survive. And some of them told me that they tried to commit suicide. And only one thing stopped them. It's their children. They were dreaming that very soon, maybe in future, they will meet their children. And only one reason which stopped against suicide, it was their kids. And it's hard to imagine what happened with them in Russian prisons. Really, many things they afraid just to inform anybody. But I've seen trauma of that kids because they've been very hugely traumatized, and now they are with mothers. It's a long time of recovery. But we learn from these children, as from the other kids, what happened in occupied territories. All of them have Russian passports. All of them attended Russian schools because it was forbidden. Because when Russian soldiers come into your house and telling you that if you will not receive Russian passport, we will terminate your parents' rights. We will take your children out and send them to Russian orphanage. Yeah, after that, you must go and receive Russian passport. and you must receive new birth certificate for your child. You should obey Russian regime. And it is everywhere in Russia and in occupied territories what Russia is doing there. And for us, it is not only war crime and a crime against humanity, but this is genocide because it's massive indoctrination of Ukrainian children. And it is when child who speaks Ukrainian immediately placed to solitary confinement for several days and go through interrogation. What is this? It is a real war crime. And for Russian regime, it's very important to convert all Ukrainian children, to annihilate Ukrainian identity and to make from them Russian children and who obey Russian regime. That's why we are continuing our rescue missions to find and return more children. Our commitment for this year was 300 children, but we returned 300, and we are continuing our rescue missions to find and return more. But 300 in comparison with 1.5 million, it's a little number. But every of these kids very important because every child's life is matter. But on the other hand, we carefully document these war crimes together with law enforcement for future tribunal, because we believe that Russia will be punished for these crimes. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much, Mykola. I mean, what you explain is, I mean, it's truly heinous. I mean, we can't imagine that people are capable of carrying out such a brutal act. Maybe I can just ask you, I mean, what are the ages of the children that were imprisoned in Russia, and the children that you mentioned, first of all, the ones that were indoctrinated after they were taken from Crimea? Were you able to return any of these? I mean, the children you mentioned that became soldiers now, I mean, are they lost causes? I mean, I don't like to use that phrase. Or were you able to bring them back?
It is all ages. It is all ages, but ages of children who've been rescued by us, it is from maybe 10 till 17. Yeah, because younger, very, very hard to help to find younger child and return, because these were when this child was a little kid when war started, and after indoctrination, it's very hard to find this child and to convince that they could return safely to Ukraine. That's why we can return only older kids, because younger kids have been indoctrinated hugely. But let me just give you one example that children with disabilities from Aleshki orphanage have been forcibly transferred to Crimea and Russia after these territories being occupied. And we could return only 2 of these kids, and Ombudsman office returned with the Qatar mediation 2 other kids. And where is another kids? More than 60 kids or 70 kids disappeared. And how many of them stays in Russia, and where they stay, we don't know. But we could find only some of them in Russian orphanage. And we found Maria Lvova-Belova in social media stated that these children learn how to deal with drones. Can I get it? It's Putin's commissioner on children's rights reported that they try to help manage drones, children with disabilities, Ukrainian children who will forcibly deported to Russia, or Ukrainian orphans. And now they manage how how to deal with drones. What is this? The same time when they shelling us kamikaze drones every night. And it's clear that they go through militarization, and these children learn how to be Russian children and how to fight with Ukraine.
Truly awful. I don't have, honestly, I don't have a word to describe this. I'm going to come back to you again in a moment, Mykola, because I have a lot of questions. But I want to come now to you, Mariam, first of all, because you've also been working on this topic through your NGO for a long time. Just for the sake of the audience, maybe you can explain a bit about what your work actually is. I mean, what you're doing, how you're cooperating with other NGOs and Ukrainian government as well.
Thank you, Amanda. It's very difficult to speak always after Mykola Kuleba, which is someone that I respect a lot after the tremendous work that his organization has done, and also as a former ombudsman. So I'm Mariam Lambert. I'm not known from the NGO Orphans Feeding Foundation, but this week, actually, incidentally, we are changing our name, which is more in line with what we are doing in terms of human rights for the children, protecting the human right of the children. So today, our name is Emile Foundation from Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I invite you to read a little bit more about that. So our NGO was created in 2011. I'm a former, actually still European civil servant. And we did some small humanitarian work, working a lot with orphans around the world in Kenya and Morocco, Nepal. And when the war in Ukraine started, as a non-Ukrainian, I felt that it was our moral duty to be in Ukraine and to help. So to avoid also that the public, because some pro-Russian people will say, oh, Ukrainian are very emotional, Ukrainian are propagandists, and I have to testify myself as a non-Ukrainian that everything that Mykola Kuleba has mentioned, it is the reality. It is the situation today. There is nothing more accurate than what he has mentioned. How we know that? It's because as a CEO also of the NGO, we decided to be on the ground to really make sure that everything that we are doing, we witness also those war crimes. So I spent a lot of time in Ukraine, mainly in Bakhmut, Soledar, Kherson, just when it was liberated. So this is why we come back to Kherson orphanage, like Alexei orphanage and the children's home that were mentioned. And I have witnessed that myself as a non-Ukrainian. That's very important to mention that. So we started working on the children in May 2023, together with Bring Kids Back, with an ombudsman, setting up the advocacy program to talk to the whole world about what is going on, to also finance and to cooperate with ombudsman in Qatar. So we were involved in all the return from September 2023 until February 2024. So under our framework, we returned about 36 children. So to make the story short, we have been witnessing, because some of the people in the public, they need to understand what is going on. Why do we have a deportation happening? And the Russians started this, as you mentioned, in 2014. So it is a well-organized war crime, actually, which was planned before. How they do that? We are violating a lot of law, international law, humanitarian law, by not letting any international organization to be a third country to allow those evacuation, which we call green corridors. That's very important to mention that. That means that all cities in Ukraine which were under occupation, that was mainly targeting for them to not allow this green corridor to take place in order to allow to make those deportation and forcibly displaced children easier for the Russian. There's also a violation of the Convention of the UN Children Armed Conflict, and of course the violation of human rights when it comes to freedom, not allowing the children to be reunited, not giving the Ukrainian authorities information about children who are forcibly transferred, as they mentioned. For the Russian Federation, according to them, 700,000 children were saved from the war, saved, but without giving any information to the Ukrainian authorities, to the parents. According to the Ukrainian authorities, 19,546 were identified as being deported. And according to the Kyiv report, we are talking about 200,000. But those are only numbers, because unfortunately, since the Ukrainian authorities and NGOs like Mykola, Kuleba, they don't have access to all occupied territories to Russia, to the information, we unfortunately have to expect more children. More and more cities are getting occupied. This is also something very important. When Russia are occupying another city like Pokrovsk, for example, the Ukrainian authorities has ensuring that further children and families need to be evacuated, because they know that the next step for the Russian will be to deport those children as well. So that's just, sorry to come back to the basic of those violation of human rights, international law by the Russian, but this is what is happening today. So regarding the work we are doing, after cooperating with the Ukrainian authorities, our team on the ground have been working on these children since 2014. So we've been working with NGOs, but also ex-journalist war investigation, Ukrainian one, who had information about the location of those children. They were focusing on Kherson. Why? Because when it was liberated, I spent 3 weeks in Berislav, in Kherson, in different regions, where we have received information from the parents directly, from the families who are still looking for their children, about what happened during the occupation, what the President Putin has done in May 2022. That means that he has passed a decree to allow to make easy for the Ukrainian children and family to get the Russian passport. And in January 2024, he has made this step mandatory for children without parental, without guardian. So that's even worse, because we have orphans, and so that's something that the Russian has done in order to expedite these adoptions by the Russian family. So we have deportation, militarization, but also an expedite process of adoption, which makes the work of the Ukrainian authorities and ourselves very difficult, because they're also changing the date of birth, changing the document, changing the passport, and in the worst case scenario, they're also burning the fingerprints, which I think, Mathieu, you will come back to the DNA test, why it is so important. But this is the reality. This is a situation as a non-Ukrainian I have witnessed, and we are here to tell the world and people what is going on. Another aspect of our organization is also to reach out to politicians globally. We were in Brazil several times to explain them what is really happening in Ukraine, to destroy all this propaganda built up by the Russian. And last but not least, another aspect we are working on is the legal aspect when it comes to sanction. Because as you mentioned, it's an organized crime, which means it's not just the Russian Federation or authorities who are doing that. It comes from the nurses, doctors, teachers who were present and who organized those transfer of those children. So I will not take the floor longer, but this gives you a real picture of what is going on. So we are working tirelessly on those areas in Kherson, and hopefully soon we will get more results. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mariam, and thank you very much for sharing the bigger picture, because I think it's really important for people to understand really what's going on here, the terrible crimes that are being committed. And as you mentioned, every time the Russians occupy further Ukrainian territory, it's an opportunity for them to take children who become, distant from their families from one way or another, and steal them. This is an atrocious crime. But I want to turn to you now, Mathieu, because I know you're also doing an important NGO work in this field. But my first question is related actually to the families that take these children in Russia. I mean, what incentives? Because I can't imagine they're not given incentives. I mean, I'm a mother of three children here. So the idea that, you know, some family could just steal somebody else's children like that, actually want to do it, is unimaginable. So what incentives do these people get offered to actually take Ukrainian children and to actually live with the fact that they know that they are stealing somebody else's kids?
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you for inviting me on today. Just at one point of clarification, the International Commission on Missing Persons is actually an international organization. We're not NGO, we're intergovernmental. So just point of clarification.
Okay, apologies.
No, it's fine, it's fine. I can't really speak to the incentives for families in Russia adopting or, you know, knowingly adopting children that have been forcibly transferred from Ukraine or illegally deported. But it does make you ask the question, do these families even know that these are forcibly transferred or illegally deported? Do they actually think that, well, you know, have they bought into the propaganda that these children have been taken to Russia for their own safety, for protection, for evacuation, which we know is quite a spurious claim on the part of the Russian Federation. The issue of missing children it's a deeply troubling aspect of the ongoing Russian aggression against Ukraine. You know, every child has rights to grow up in their family environment, to know their culture, and this is where I think the forced deportation of children intersects with notions of genocide. They're being denied their rights, they're being denied their identity, which helps to build that case. And the genocide argument that Mykola mentioned initially. But I think, you know, sort of looking more long term, one of the challenges will be, and I think it's amazing what Save Ukraine and what Orphans Feeding, I know the organization has changed its name, are doing to actually locate and to bring the kids back, to bring the children back. But, you know, I think from a long-term perspective, one of the challenges, how to identify those that can't identify themselves. And you mentioned this to yourself, that, you know, they've been forcibly deported, they've been put up for adoption, and their identities are changed. Yeah, their passports burnt. How in 2, 5, 10 years' time do you identify a child who may have been 1, 2, 3, 4 when seized in 2022 or 2023? And, you know, I think one of the answers is DNA. It's not a silver bullet, but DNA can facilitate identifications. When we think of the conflicts in the former Yugoslavia, where ICMP has done a lot of work, DNA was used to identify the dead. In this case, DNA can identify the living, those children that can't identify themselves. So ICMP has been working with Ukraine. We started in 2014, and we provided assistance with the DNA testing of literally thousands of samples of the victims of the MH17 terror attack, the downing of the Malaysian Airlines plane over Ukraine. Since 2022, we've ramped up our support and we've established a small office in Kyiv, and we're working with various different institutions and with civil society. But one of the components of our work at this point in time is to work with the National Police of Ukraine and the Office of the Commissioner on Persons Missing in Special Circumstances to work on outreach to relatives and family members of children that may be missing or deported, to encourage them to provide a family reference sample to help build a database of genetic profiles of the families, so that in the future there is a, if you like, a tool that exists that can help facilitate the identification of children that can't identify themselves. And this is hugely important, and it's not only for the missing children. We're working also with Ukraine to, you know, basically collect references from all family members of all missing persons, because this is what can be done at this point in time. So maybe the children are inaccessible, maybe the bodies of the missing persons may be inaccessible elsewhere, but at this point in time, the collection of data, including family reference samples or reference samples from the relatives is absolutely vital. And yeah, yeah, we shall continue to support Ukraine in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I go for the next round of questions, I'd like to invite the audience to put their questions either in the chat box or by clicking on the hand icon. I want to come back to you now, Mykola, because as was mentioned by Mariam, the government of Ukraine initiated the Bring Kids Back initiative. I mean, we at EPC are also engaged in supporting this initiative, and it seems to be becoming more visible. Does your organization and other organizations such as yours cooperate and work with the Bring Kids Back initiative? I mean, it's you have this special coalition within it, which is coordinated by Canada. Part of the goal is to draw international attention to this heinous crime. So could you give us some insights on how I mean, I don't think useful is the right word, but what have been the main benefits so far from this coalition, and what more needs to be done to make it more impactful in terms of grabbing global attention?
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Mariam and Matthew. And you mentioned very important initiatives and the issues, and thank you for your cooperation and for everything you're doing for Ukrainian children. And Amanda, answer your questions. We are part of presidential initiative Bring Kids Back, and we cooperate with the presidential office, with the government, and we are responsible for returning children, and because we have unique strategy. We, as you know, that any Ukrainian government have official way through Qatar, through Vatican, and through coalition of countries, but you can see that not many children have been returned through official initiatives, and it's very hard to have any solutions with the Putin's administration, even through Qatar, because as for me, they try to manipulate all time, and they try to block any rescue, any return, and this negotiation is very long. And we understand that every day we are losing children because through this huge indoctrination, more and more children stays in Russia and get used for living there, and it will be very hard to return them, because when child growing up and with clear understanding, then whole the world is aggressor, and NATO countries and Ukraine, where is Nazi trying to kill them. Child form through these narratives. And now we have investigation team in Save Ukraine. They trying to communicate with children in Crimea and Donbass and new occupied territories, and harder to convince children to come back to Ukraine, because they believe that here in Ukraine they could be killed by Nazi. They could be killed because when we return girls, they inform us that we believe that this is NATO army fighting with Russia on Ukrainian land, and Russian soldiers in occupation told us that these German, American, British soldiers coming to rape girls. Can you believe that? And we have cases when these children run away from their homes just to escape of rape. Yeah, and now with Bring Kids Back, we trying to involve more partners to find a real mechanism of returning children. And it is true that it's very hard to build any communication with our families who in occupied territories and in Russia. It's very hard to find these families. You can see that 90, maybe 9% of children disappeared from their social media, disappeared there. And it's very hard to find any information. It's very hard to find their cell phone number. It's very hard to communicate with them because children in their schools learn that if you will communicate with the Ukrainian side, you will be punished. And children really afraid do this. That's why, and no any official mechanism now. That's why Bring Kids Back initiative trying to unite countries around these issues and to find a real mechanism. And now we are discussing a reintegration white paper for these children who've been returned. And I believe it will be presented soon. But before that, it is white paper of returning children. And we Bring Kids Back trying to find any possible way how to help our Ukrainian children survive and return. But the last thing, personally me, I'm in blacklist of Russia from 2015 as the enemy of Russia because I'm protecting Ukrainian children's rights. And because Save Ukraine is returning Ukrainian children, we are blamed of Russian media and we are terroristic organization in Russia because we are rescuing Ukrainian children, but in Russian media, we are kidnapping children, Russian children from new Russian territories. Can you imagine this? How we can build any communication with them? How we can help these children to be returned? We know, we have information that many kids want to come back, but they really afraid or they have no chance because they have no official representatives. And Russia will never give these children back through like official negotiation. But to find and return more children, avoid any official mechanism, it's very hard. It's like every child is special operation to return. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's very hard, and it's a very emotional topic. But if I can just stay with you for a second, what more do you think could be done to raise international awareness to this crime, particularly in some of the global South countries which do actually have leverage on Russia? I mean, I know, for example, in China there was recently an event on the Bring Kids Back initiative, which is something that wouldn't have happened six months ago. So is there some positive developments in terms of getting more international engagement from these types of country?
If this question to me, to raise an awareness, we don't need any laws. We have to raise awareness, like in this group today, or through media in different countries. But we disappeared, Ukraine, and these issues disappeared from media because it looked like nobody cared. Really, I'm very honest with you. I've been in the United States now on different platforms, and I haven't seen now information about these issues in media. It's very seldom media is trying to just to communicate, but it's nothing. It's nothing, really. It's look like nobody cares because we can find more about election. We can find about battle with political parties, but not about more about interests, different groups of politicians or of different organizations, about interests, not about values. Where is our values of democratic? Where is our democratic values? Where is our human values? why nobody cares about innocent children who are suffering, who are trying to survive in occupied territories, how under the Russian regime, and it's look like nobody. It's very complicated to understand this, but it's I've been in United Nations, and why they have no one voice on these issues? Why they have no solution? I don't know. I have no idea. But I feel pain in my heart for my children, because it's like somebody come to your home and take your kids out and say, you sit here and do nothing. And we know how to care about your kids. Stay apart. But what you will be doing? You will stand and fight. And we are fighting, but we need support. We need support, press on Russia and to find mechanism. I don't know, it should be new mechanism, because the former mechanism, which was developed after Second World War, they're useless. We have to find a right way how to help Ukrainian children.
I do agree with you that we need new mechanisms. I mean, the United Nations has been paralyzed; it's not able to do anything. And I also agree that there's a big need to tell the world about this crime, because I would say there has been quite a lot of coverage in some news outlets, but broadly speaking, most people don't actually know about this crime that's being committed by Russia. So there's a really big urgent need for more advocacy, more activities, global activities, and of course this is all about resources, to put it out there. But it's definitely that something needs to be done. I would just like to come back to
Amanda. Sorry. You asked about mechanism. I think the first step should be for the UN General Assembly to pass a resolution, and this resolution would show the world's commitment to the immediate and unconditional return of Ukrainian children. It would also prove that the global community stands ready to protect Ukrainian children and reunite them with their families. It could be first step.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. This would be a really important first step, and it should be something that everybody is pushing for. But the last UN General Assembly, it didn't go in that direction. But we need to keep driving for this, and I'm sure everybody here is driving for this every day. But I want to come back to you, Mariam. I mean, what do you think that could be done to raise awareness? Would be my first question, and my second question is actually to revert back to these the children. Because obviously, when they returned from captivity and the absolutely horrendous situations that they've been confronted to, how do they actually get rehabilitated? To actually integrate back into life? I mean, how do you actually start to do this?
Thank you, Amanda. First of all, I know it will not change your world and your vision, but I hope slowly. But Mykola, rest reassured that at least here, we will never give up on speaking all around the globe about that. We will never give up on putting that topic on the table everywhere we can. So that won't change your view on the whole global issues, but at least rest reassured that this is exactly what we do day and night. When it comes to the UN and the international awareness, I think one thing is important is that I see a lot of initiatives. A lot of different initiatives from different people, organization, bring kids back as well. And I think there's a need of clarification, of coordination altogether. Different people, small groups can do little, but all together, if we are absolutely together in having a really important strategy on where we go, how to advocate, how to talk about these issues, which is one of the worst issues in this war about these children, I think we could improve. There is always room for improvement, and I invite really everyone, because as you mentioned a little bit, Mykola, unfortunately, I'm afraid that this topic sometimes is served for political interest. So one day you will see that they will talk about it a lot in Belgium, for example. I'm from Belgium, so I can say that because there is a Belgium election, this is what happened in the Netherlands. Once the election is done, drop the topic. And that's something that we need to be careful. Either you are really defending this topic because you care, because as a mother of 3 children, we truly believe, even as a non-Ukrainian, that these children are Ukrainian, belongs to their family without any political agenda. And I think that's also a problem that we need to raise. A lot of ministers are talking about that when it suits them. So having a really comprehensive strategic plan together with civil society, international organization, and the government, I think this is something that I will keep telling on social media. Without that, we will keep talking, unfortunately, about this topic in a few years. Important information as well is we are talking about the age of children. We are talking about children from 7 months old, babies, to 70 years old. So this is also time is the biggest enemy in this topic, because in 2 years, the child will never, ever even remember their own parents. The third point, and sorry, I took some notes, not to forget. One important topic which is not mentioned anywhere, and it was just randomly mentioned by Telegraph or other media, we are dealing directly with family, I mean myself personally, with family who are living in occupied territories. The atrocity that Mykola has described, and also Matthew, is even worse, because now, in order to put more pressure, and because the Russian Federation doesn't care about the international environment, they don't care about the violation of international law. So in that situation, we need to be creative, because now what is happening, on top of the deportation, children are being held in prison. Children from 13 to 17 years old, who are conscious about these atrocities, who are trying to help to find a way to be evacuated from occupied territories to Ukraine, are now being held in children's prison, all under the same cases. Terrorism attack, attempt of assassination, all under the same Article 201 of the Russian Criminal Code. This is absolutely even worse. And they are doing that to discourage other children living under occupation to even dare to speak about that, to even dare to raise awareness. So this is another really, really bad situation that we are witnessing now. When it comes to reintegration, I think Save Ukraine is one of the really renowned NGO who are really having this process in place. But from our side, we unfortunately are now trying to even try to reintegrate children who were returned, but were, because they didn't have any choice, sent back to other territories which could be also at risk. So we are trying also to encourage them. I know it's not ideal. If there is no place to stay in Ukraine, if there is no proper reintegration system, it's also to give them the choice to be treated in other countries until they are ready enough to come back. So that's something that we are trying to do as well. Sorry, Amanda, I'm taking the floor, but the important point that needed to be mentioned, especially the children who are held in Russian prison.
No, and don't be sorry, Mariam. You raised a lot of great points here as well that everybody needs to hear.
Amanda, can I add something?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Mariam. It's very important. You know, you are totally right. It's look like what for me, we have to satisfy interests of politicians and to find benefits for them and to for our children. It's not about how they can help, it's how we can find benefits for them to help Ukrainian children, to help children survive, to have to return them, save their lives, really. And it's horrible. Yeah, guys, we have to find something for politicians, their interests. It's number one. Number two, it's just short example. We have a rescue team, and every day we are discussing and planning children returns. And we have some boys just last week have been recruited to Russian army. We plan their escape or return, but they've been taken to Russian army, and they send their photos of totally abandoned in Russian trenches. They sit in there and digging trenches. And another guys, it is a boy 19 years old and girl 17 years old. They have a baby. It was Ukrainian orphans who've been stolen, and they've been forcibly deported first to Crimea and then to Russia. And the child, they gave birth to a child, and these two Ukrainian children, they forcibly receive Russian passports. Russia forced them to receive passports, but they don't want to be Russian. They want to come back. But a child, the baby, who is this baby? It is not Ukrainian baby. It's Russian baby. But they don't want to leave this baby in Russia. They want to take this baby to Ukraine. They don't want to stay there. But it's not any mechanism. It's not zero mechanism how we can save this baby and these two kids.
I completely agree with you. As you mentioned, I appreciate very much the coalition and everything, but as you mentioned, there will not be one single mechanism for all. Every case is different. Every case need to be truly thought properly before even starting the process of returning. So, but coming back to the international advocacy, I think I was really surprised to understand and to realize those global south countries and BRICS countries, as we call them, they are not aware. This is even more scary. We think because we sleep, we eat, we do everything thinking of these children, but because we are in the topic. But outside, even in Belgium, Amanda, you live in Belgium, I'm from Belgium. My friend has said to me, oh, you were in Brussels, talking about what? Children? Oh, they are kidnapped? That's what we are talking about. So we can't give up. And coming back to the resolution of the UN, it's exactly the same as what your Chief of Staff, Andrei Yermak, mentioned last week about the victory plan. It's not about to be into the NATO, it's to get this invitation to NATO. That's a clear engagement. And the resolution from the UN is the same, clear engagement. That's the willingness to be part of it. So Amanda, we've been a bit hard.
It's okay. I think as well, we shouldn't be naive here as well, because some of these global south countries are aware of this problem. I mean, we've traveled as the EPC actually to several global south countries, and we always raise this issue of kidnapped children in every single place we go, and they know, but there needs to be much more pressure put on them. It needs to be much more visible and much more messaging towards this, whether it's China, India, South Africa. They know. Let's not be naive. They know, and they could do much more. But I want to give the floor back to Matthew for a moment, because we're running out of time. I should have had a longer meeting rather than an hour. I wanted to ask you, Matthew, I mean, are there any sort of lessons learned, I mean, from other cases of kidnapped children that have taken place, I mean, in the past? I mean, have we learned anything from this? I mean, in the future, Ukraine will certainly be an example when you successfully return your children. But are there any existing cases that are used at the moment?
I mean, we can look to Latin America, to South America. As you're aware, in the 70s and 80s, you had, the right-wing juntas, left-wing rebels. They were often detained. I mean, this is where the idea of enforced disappearance first came from in the first place. But their children were often taken away and adopted and maybe sent elsewhere. there's important work being done by other organizations, DNA Bridge and the NGO Probosceda, for example. And I think this provides a model for what Ukraine is starting to do now, as I say, is to build that database of family reference samples that could potentially help identify those that can't help themselves. And if I may just make one more thing, this is something that neither that Mariam didn't touch upon in terms of the future and the outlook. I think there is a need for a greater international consensus, and I just want to touch upon this and comment upon this. And I think the international community, such as it is, needs to come together behind the peace formula, especially point 4. I don't want to single out any one, but point 4 of the peace formula, of course, is the return of POWs, detained civilians, and return of the children. And if you can build that international consensus, I'm aware that the Canadians are hosting conference in Ottawa at the end of this month, and Canada, together with Norway, have taken the joint lead on supporting Ukraine on point 4. This is hugely important in terms of global advocacy to ensure the return of all POWs, detained citizens, civilians, sorry, and the deported and missing children. So thank you.
Thank you. We have a question here, and I want to put it to you, Mykola, because it's to you in the last few minutes that we have. Mr. Kuleba, you're talking about the real mechanism of returning Ukrainian kids. What, in your opinion, should and could be done? What is lacking in our efforts to locate and bring Ukrainian kids back? How international community could pressure Russia to force it to provide information about location of deported children? It's from Victoria Vlasenko. I think she's from Deutsche Welle. I know you already touched on some of those issues, but maybe you can elaborate. And maybe one point you could also elaborate on is the potential increase of sanctions on Russians who are actually engaged in these mechanisms. I mean, right across the board, from families that we know about to different types of officials and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you. We have to negotiate, and I think international organization as the Red Cross and UNICEF should act, not just to wait something when Russia will do something, but first of all to ask Russia to demand, not ask, through international legislation to demand to give information about Ukrainian families and children who stays in occupied territories and in Russia. We have to have access to just to assess their needs, just to ask them if they're ready to come back. What do they need? What kind of support they need? And UNICEF and Red Cross can provide this support to Ukrainian families in occupied territories and in Russia. They must demand, not just to pay your attention, must. It is their obligation. It's not about what they want to do. It's about just to show that the real organization who have mandate, who can do something, they must to make this first step to give Ukrainian authorities information about families and children. If Russian ombudsman Maria Lvova-Belova stated a year ago about 744,000 registered Ukrainian children in Russia, they immediately should go there and ask, please give us this information. If you are not ready to give this information to Ukrainian authorities, give it to us. We want to go to these children and families and to check if their rights is protected or not. That's all. It's first step. If we will not have this first step, we are not ready to continue this conversation, because we will not find any mechanism.
I'm afraid I have to end our conversation now. I think we could actually talk about this for much longer. I would like to thank all of you for joining today and talking about this really important and painful issue. It's something that definitely needs to have more airspace more print space. It needs to be on more television shows and whatnot. It needs to be there, and it's not there. From the EPC side, I really want to thank all of you. We will be continuing to work on this topic. Actually, in a couple of weeks, we have a huge conference in the European Parliament on the Bring Kids Back initiative, and presenting some of the findings that have been worked on within these different white papers. So I hope that you will be able to join us either online or in person. It's an important, and hopefully European Parliament will eventually embed some of these recommendations into their own resolutions. This would be an important step. So thanks again for joining us, and the work that you're doing is hard, very hard, but it's so important. These children, these innocent children, have been stolen, indoctrinated into a life that they never wanted, and I truly hope that each and every one of them is returned to their families in Ukraine as soon as possible, and of course that the end of Russia's full-scale invasion comes soon. So Slava Ukraine, and thanks to you all, and
Thank you.
good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone.